R Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
I can do it. Welcome to the Dripping Bucket, where we're totally professional and never make decisions at the last moment. My name is Krystle Matar. I've got J E Hannaford with us, and as usual, I have Michael Fletcher taped to his chair, so he can't do anything else. So, I lost my train of thought. How to do that? It was doing so good.
It was, it was a great intro.
Talking
you
about
fucked it up.
I know. I have to, though, because I feel like if ever a single episode passes with no problems, then people will start expecting that from me, and then I'm totally
That's a high pressure. Big
right,
pressure.
Exactly. You get it. So yeah, we were talking a little bit about subverting expectations, but I think it kind of dovetails nicely into where we left off, just about even when you're subverting the expectations, your focus becomes the characters. So you can do pterodactyls and you can do emotion dragons. Oh shit, that was a spoiler. Whatever. But and you do telepathic dogs who can communicate in images. But even as you're coming up with all these really complex ideas, your focus is still characters, and that's definitely what I saw in The Skin. And it's always what I like the most about a writer. It's like if I'm obsessed with a writer, it's because they focus on characters. So I'm wondering if that was a natural choice for you, like it just kind of happened without you deciding to do it, or if it was a conscious thing, similar to the spite of, I'm not going to write 7 books of battle, I'm going to focus on people, or a combination thereof.
I think, obviously, when I started, I was very much still, although I was not wanting to write 7 books of battle, I still very much, because it's quite a long time ago, had ideas of how a book should be. And therefore, that first Gates of Hope, originally, when it was first written, still fitted within that framework, which I think is why people compare it to classic epic fantasy. They compare it to Robin Hobb, they compare it to Pern, they compare it to Anne McCaffrey, with like R.J. Barker as a crazy uncle thrown in. So
those are really good comps.
So, I mean, that's where it sits, basically. But but because of that, it's got a bit more of a classic feel. So it's third person, it's past tense, it's multi-POV. But when I wrote it originally for my dad. So I wanted it to be something different that he hadn't read, but something safe, because I was writing it for someone in my family to read. Which then meant that I didn't feel like I took the risks. But when I then sat down to write The Skin and the Pact, having shelved Gates, I found that I could get into the characters in the much maligned first person so much better. I could get in their heads, I could get close, and I just found it easier to get that intimacy of the character's story. And I wanted it to be that closed, potentially unrelated, unreliable narrator of only their perspective. Which means that when you're working at that level, you have to be focusing on just their interrelationships, because otherwise there's no story. They're just wandering around following set directions. And I think that once I found that was my comfort zone, and that's where I felt happiest was, and when I'm writing it, I'm there. So I tend to be dialogue heavy. If I'm properly in the moment, I am writing what the characters are saying to each other. I literally can see it in my head. There are scenes in The Skin and the Pact that I can tell you exactly what's going on off the bow. I can tell you what ship's where. It's not in the book. Because the reader doesn't need that detail. But I can see everything else as I'm writing it. So I tend to write a lot of dialogue and then fill that bit in afterwards. But I think because you are looking almost through a character's eyes and looking at their emotions, I think it tends to lend itself to more intimate writing and more character-driven things.
With first person, the tricky part for me was kind of the readers. I think they forget that they're only seeing one side of the story.
Yeah.
And, so when your POV narrator gets stuff wrong, they're sort of thrown out of this, like, oh, his relationship with his wife isn't at all what he said it was, and it's kind of, it's jarring for them, which can be great, or can make them angry at you.
Yeah.
And so then you're kind of left very subtly dropping hints of like, I do actually know that he's lying to himself. I know that. You know that. He doesn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's that, getting the reader to the point where they know something the, first person POV character doesn't know is tricky, because you've only got their POV to show them, show the reader. And if the reader figures it out, but the character doesn't, the character looks like an idiot. So it's there's a tight.
There's a fine line, isn't there? In the Pact, I introduced a second POV, and I found the hardest moment to write in the Pact was the point of a fight sequence where both of those first person POVs were involved.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That hurts the brain just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So having both of them and not repeating it, not trying to repeat the scenario for the reader. So passing the baton effectively between the two, if one pursuing someone, one taking a fairly heavy blow, so they're knocked out briefly. Things that flow within the sequence but allow it to happen. I mean, I'm glad I did that, because I think when it then came to mixing in Gates of Sorrow, where the POVs do this all the time for two of them, and they are not interacting as a fight, but they're interacting with the same individual characters and each other. But when I struggle with a scene in third person in Gates, to keep that characterization close, I will go away and I will rewrite it in first. And then I'll go through and I'll change what I need to change to make it slip back to third.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do all my initial plotting in like present tense, often sliding into first. And then when I actually write the book, it's all past tense and a tight third. I don't know why.
Yeah. I still like tight third.
That makes sense, because you're kind of writing up like a police report, like subject sees this, subject does this, such and such things are said, and it's that makes sense to me. And then once you're ready to tell the story, you fall kind of naturally into your comfort zone of third.
Yeah, I still find third hard. I battle with third. I cannot wait. I mean, Devon Madsen was the first person that I saw that really nailed the multi-first person POV. And I read that first book and I was like, oh, I can do this then. It was like licensed.
Yeah, you can do multi.
To do what I wanted in my heart to do was multi-first person POV. It was just that that's permission granted.
That's We Ride the Storm, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. It did feel like permission granted, that it was actually, this is okay. They're clearly distinct, but it does mean that when you're doing your characterization, that things have to be spot on. There cannot be any continuation of your voice between one and another. So your voice has to be distinctly unique in each of those different first-person POVs, otherwise somebody who maybe misses the cue name at the start of the chapter can be slightly disorientated. So choice of language is really important, choice of phrasing.
Yeah.
I think that makes a big difference, apart from the setting, the maturity of thought, obviously, the decisions. As you say, first person, if someone's making stupid decisions, they...
My bread and butter.
Yeah, but we all love you for it.
I have decided to start making my characters stupider because the third book is getting really hard. So half of these people are way smarter than I am, and I'm like, I can't do this. I don't know. So this new series is like, okay, these guys are fucking idiots, and I'm just here for the ride, and it's been so freeing of just like, how can I make this as bad as possible? In the depth of your stupidity. Got it. This is perfect. So
I like that. But yeah, I mean, I think character can be used. The tone can do a lot. Things like a choice of words, choice of whether to shorten words. And often new writers don't shorten words as much as they should. And you can see it, and it feels unnatural, it feels stilted, and it feels too formal, and it feels quite distant. But if you want a character that is like all of those things, don't shorten any of their words.
Yeah. But I find that in itself is a thing that I notice, and it drives me nuts, where the dialogue doesn't use contraction, but they're like artificially trying to how do I put it? They're using the same sentence structure that we would. Well, they're using the same kind of sentence structure that we would use now that we have contractions, because arguably the flow of how we speak has changed by our use of contractions, and so then the actual word use and the structure of statements are still very modern and informal. They just stop using contractions, and it drives me nuts. If you're gonna go that formal, you really do have to go all in and kind of examine, like, think really, really hard about what words are gonna yank people out and which words sound too modern and what statements sound too modern. Because if you can have modern dialogue in fantasy. I absolutely stand by that 100%. You can have contractions, you can have like weird slang. It's fine. Like, that doesn't bother me. But if you decide to go the other way and go stiff and formal, you better make sure that you're actually doing it and not just dropping contractions. And
it's so fun trying to figure out what's going to be an anachronism. Like, I find myself, I'll be writing and the character will say, okay, this, and I'm like, okay, okay, that's a modern usage, and now I gotta go research the etymology of okay. When did that first appear? Does that fit in a fantasy setting?
My big the hill I'm gonna die on is all right with one L and one word. And it's like, and to me it's like, okay, I'm writing Gaslamp, and Mark Twain had all right in his novels, and his novels predate Gaslamp, so therefore I should be allowed to use all right in this setting of Victorian.
I use all right in dialogue like that because for me it has a different meaning to all right. All right is all correct. Really, all right is it's okay.
Exactly. That's exactly why it's the hill I'm willing to die on.
I froze again there. I'm not quite sure if I still...
No, we can still hear you.
That's okay. There is a teenager in the other room on a VR headset, and I cannot extricate it from his head.
Relationships and subverting sort of expectations. Is there phrases like an aspect of that that sort of most appeals? Like, is it the sort of typical romantic relationships you want to subvert, or is it more friendships or expectations, or where do you find yourself sort of drawn towards?
I tend to choose found family over relationships. I don't like killing parents. My parents are mostly present unless they have died of old age. When I wrote the pact, by the time I finished that, I realized I had at one point 4 mothers, several cousins, fathers, and all sorts of others, all with active speaking roles in the book. And it's like, I don't believe in killing family. I think there is a tension in keeping the family. And I know that's very much a thing. People go, oh, it's easier to get rid of the family. But there is a different tension if you bring the family in. If the family's lives are at stake, if the family's well-being is at stake, if you've had to leave your family behind and they're still alive, you're going to be missing them.
Yeah.
So, and that gives that person
Disney
more
always
of a...
kills them off.
Yeah. You don't need
otherwise
to.
It's a short movie. Mummy shows up and says, no, you're not doing any of that stupid shit. Put that down. Go back to bed. You're like, wow, okay, that movie sucked. It's like, no, if mom's dead, then they can do all the dumb shit.
Well, I think to Jenny's point, though, I think, there's an interesting story of like figuring out how to sidestep mom's still alive and forbidding you from doing the dumb shit. You know what I mean? Like if go to bed and then they tie together a couple of blankets and sneak out their window, and then now their lives are in peril. Like that adds a new layer of like, when is this person's mother going to find them? Like, so there's layers there that can be definitely bolstered by those familial connections.
Yeah, definitely. I think it can add a lot to it, and it can also add humanity to characters that maybe seem
even
distant or seem. Yeah, they've got certain Lord Sal's mother appears in the pact. Therefore, suddenly you see a very different perspective,
a different layer
to this
of Sal,
basically Varys. If we're taking a Game of Thrones analogy, is this Varys of the dystopian future?
Yeah.
He has a very different side when suddenly his family are brought back in the picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think, as you say, it's not just the escape and will they get caught. It brings a different side and a different dynamic that I think a lot of people tend to just go, all right, they're dead. It's easier to not deal with them, and then we can just deal with this one person and not have to think about the fact that they're forgetting it. And when one of my beta readers said, don't think he thinks about his family enough, I was like, okay, make sure that he thinks about them a little bit more.
Can do. Yeah
that's fine.
It can definitely be a big pain point too if things aren't going well. There's that drawback of, man, life could be easier if I just give up and go home right now.
But it also, I mean, with Surin, the entire inciting incident is an injury to one of her family. Her entire arc is about the fact that one of her family has been fatally wounded, and how she, as a teenager with her own decisions and her own mindset, who knows better than all the adults around her, deals with trying to fix something she feels responsible for, but doesn't really want to accept responsibility for, but does sort of feel that she is responsible for.
Yeah.
Subconsciously trying to at least accept that weight. But I think also just little things like throwing, I've said about communication, about the biology side of things, and but I just, you've got standard folklore. There's folklore in the pack that involves a square yard of land on the border of David and Ceredigion, and it is a place from which you can see islands thought lost to time, and you can only see it from that 1 square foot of land on the coast. And it's this old bit of folklore, and it's there. And I mean, I threw the Lady of the Lake in there. I've subverted the Lady of the Lake as well. I mean, the Lady of the Lake's a mother in mine. So
Nice.
beautifully terrifying was how she was described, and I am taking that. But you then have a case of like, okay, so there's this really old bit of folklore about these views. What's going to happen? They're going to wreck it because they're going to dig a chunk up so they can take it with them so they can see where they're going.
Yeah.
This plot of land has been there for centuries, but okay, well, if we need to see where we're going, let's just hunk a chunk of this turf up and take it on the boats with us, and then we can stand and look where we're going. So I'm quite happy.
Dungeons and Dragons characters.
It was
like,
a bit.
The GM's
it was a bit
like,
of a
set this little thing up, and they're like, "Wow, we'll just cut it up out of the ground and take it with us." Like,
Yeah.
That's where playing D&D definitely comes as a strength of just like being able to see ridiculous solutions to problems that you thought were pretty solid.
Absolutely. Although on the other hand, I mean, we all know how absolutely group defying a door can be. So yes, there was a very long and convoluted attempt to open a door with a group of players many years ago that involved posting the druid through the door as a snake. The door wasn't locked. We just hadn't tried the handle. So yes. But yeah, and things like Welsh dragon from mythology. I mean, you got there he is. That is in my book named Lord Flame, and the arch on there is real. The stone
it's a place you can
inside it is real. It exists. The stone inside the Broken Binding edition actually physically exists. That one that is drawn is drawn from a photograph of the stone and those holes. And it's a weird piece of Welsh history that I understand, and I may be wrong, and someone watching it may correct me, but I understand that they don't really know what it is artifact for. But it is such a historically important artifact that churches and cathedrals and abbeys have been built on the site of this one stone.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're like, what is so important that the princes of Wales are buried next to this stone?
That's really cool.
Well, clearly, you're sitting there looking at it going, obviously Lord Flame's buried, the Welsh dragon's buried under there.
There's a dragon.
Duh, that's where he's hiding. He's asleep under there, obviously.
Yeah, fantasy writers dream a mysterious stone that we can...
And so... But yeah, mysterious stone that nobody quite knows what it marks. It seems to be a Christian site, but it's not a Christian cross. But it is a Christian site. So yeah, it's just one of those things. And then, you know, I just like pulling bits like that out of the environment that you're in and going, right, okay, so nice island over there, right? Yeah, okay, we'll have that. And nice lakes up there. You could hide a whole army under there. But
I think we could do an entire episode just talking about the use of stones in fantasy.
Yeah. Mysterious magic
what
stone.
book doesn't have like a stone, an important stone in it somewhere?
Gotta have a stone in it somewhere. Some mysterious stone. Fabulous. But but I just like pulling things that maybe you don't expect necessarily. And I tried to subvert little things when I wrote Gates, but maybe I wasn't brave enough in that case. So like Gates starts with not a farm boy, he's a doorman. His family's in, burns down, he's going to find work to send money home to make sure they can rebuild.
Yeah.
Because he's in his 20s, he's in a position to go. Little tweaks in Gates, it's small.
I think that those little subversions are actually really powerful because you still get to have that familiarity and that shorthand language that exists in fantasy as a genre when you're doing the small subversions, because a lot is said, or a lot is unsaid, I think, in a genre that lets it read cleanly, where those of us that are really familiar with certain aspects of this genre We can read between the lines. We can see around these corners. So when you subvert these little things, these little expectations, it has a lot of impact in being, oh, well, this is brand new. This is unique. This is so memorable, but also we still have that connection to the genre itself of it's unique, but also it's familiar, and I can see the roots of, as you said, these older versions of the genre. And I think that's a special kind of magic of small subversions.
Yeah. I mean, we can all go all out on big subversions like you.
Yeah.
And Michael. I mean, King of Subversion, let's just make an entire society of insects. Brilliant. Cannot wait to read that one. I'm desperate to read that. I've got to finish Brick and Bone, which I'm halfway through. And I am going, it's next on my list after I finish the book I'm currently reading. It's literally lined up and queued up. And then, but I mean, I'm on a project on insects at the moment. Not the same.
Oh, cool.
But I've got an insect project in hand at the moment. And so I understand from somebody who has read it that it is not going to overlap with mine. So I am 100% reading yours next, because I want to see your society. Mine is human, but it's very, very interwoven. The entire society is woven around insects. So, but real insects rather than fantasy insects, but they're kind of not.
Breaking things now. You're throwing a tantrum because she's into bugs, just like you are.
Well, that was the first thing said when I spoke to this friend and I said about this new project and it's about insects. The immediate response was, but Fletcher's writing one about insects. I was like, okay. No, I don't think they're the same. I don't think we're going down the same route here. It's fine.
Yeah, probably not. My goal was to write a fantasy for aliens, as if aliens were writing fantasy for themselves.
Okay.
And they're not humans, so they're insects, and it was all written for insects, which makes no fucking sense. But that was the idea that sort of sparked it all.
And yet I'm hearing really great things about it. It's just like, people are really eating this up.
I'm totally confused. They are relating to these huge, violent praying mantises.
I wonder if Riverside is having trouble, because if we all fell out, then it's not my fault.
Anyway, so I think we were somewhere around the 20-ish minute mark.
Yeah, we were already done.
Yeah. So how about we'll wrap up here, and thank you once again, Jenny, for joining us.
Oh, I think she's frozen again. Yeah,
she's gone and I'm gone.